You've been told that paying off your mortgage early is the dream. No debt, no bank taking your money, just you, your house, and total financial freedom. And it feels amazing, responsible, smart. But here's what no one tells you. For millions of homeowners, paying off that mortgage early is quietly costing them tens, sometimes hundreds, of thousands of dollars. Not because they're doing anything illegal, not because of fees or penalties, but because of something called opportunity cost. And if you've never heard those two words applied to your mortgage, this video is about to change the way you think about your home forever. Before we get into the math, I want to plant a seed. By the end of this video, I'm going to reveal something that completely reframes this whole question. And I promise you won't see it coming. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're at a party, a really boring financial party, and someone hands you $500. You can use it to pay down your mortgage or invest it in the stock market. Which one feels better? Almost every person in the room says, pay the mortgage. And you know why? Because debt feels like a monster living under your financial bed. Getting rid of it feels like turning the light on. Psychologists call this loss aversion. The idea that losses hurt roughly twice as much as equivalent gains feel good. This was documented by Nobel Prize-winning economist Daniel Kahneman and his colleague Amos Tversky. And it explains why paying off debt feels smarter than investing, even when the math says the complete opposite. Here's a stat that'll stick with you. A 2022 Bankrate survey found that 35% of American homeowners say being mortgage-free is their number one financial priority. Higher than retirement savings, higher than building an emergency fund. That's not a character flaw, that's just human nature. But in personal finance, acting on emotion with your biggest asset is exactly how you leave a fortune on the table. And here's where it gets interesting. Let's talk numbers, because this is where most financial channels wave their hands and say, it depends, and I'm going to be way more specific than that. Say you have a $400,000 mortgage at 3%. Millions of Americans locked in rates like this in 2020 and 2021. You've got an extra $1,000 a month. Option A, throw it at your mortgage. Option B, invest it. If you invest that $1,000 a month into a diversified index fund, the kind that tracks the S&P 500, over 20 years, at the market's historical average return of roughly 10% annually, you end up with approximately $687,000. If instead you'd put that money toward the mortgage, you'd have saved around $72,000 in interest. That's a $615,000 difference. Now, the stock market isn't guaranteed. It goes up and down. We all know that. But over any 20-year rolling period in U.S. history, the S&P 500 has never delivered a negative return. That's not a promise, but it is a very meaningful pattern. So the real question isn't, should I pay off debt? It's, what's my mortgage interest rate, and can I beat it with investments? But wait, here's the catch. Here's the concept that genuinely blew my mind the first time I really sat with it. Inflation is your friend when you have fixed-rate debt. Here's how it works. When you take out a $400,000 mortgage today, you owe $400,000 worth of today's dollars. But you'll be paying it back in tomorrow's dollars. Dollars that are worth less every single year because of inflation. Think of it like paying back a loan in slightly cheaper currency each year, automatically, without doing anything. The Federal Reserve targets around 2% annual inflation. Over 30 years, the real purchasing power of your fixed mortgage payment drops significantly. A $2,000 monthly payment in today's money is worth the equivalent of about $1,100 in purchasing power 30 years from now, if inflation holds at 2%. This is why sophisticated real estate investors love long-term, low-rate debt. At a low enough interest rate, it's not really a burden. It's practically a subsidy. Because inflation quietly erodes the real cost of your debt, while your invested assets are growing in nominal terms. Sounds pretty good, right? So why would anyone ever pay off their mortgage early? Well, I'm not here to tell you that carrying a mortgage forever is always smart. It's not. There are real situations where paying it off is absolutely the right move. Situation 1, your rate is high. If you took out a mortgage in 2023 at 6.5 or 7%, the math changes completely. You'd need to reliably earn 7% or more after taxes to beat that guaranteed 7% return from eliminating the debt. That's a much tighter race, and for a lot of people, the guaranteed win is the smarter bet. Situation 2. You're near or in retirement. Cash flow security matters more when you're living on a fixed income. A paid-off home means one less bill. That's a real tangible benefit when you're no longer drawing a salary. Situation 3. You won't actually invest the difference. The math only works if you take the money you're not throwing at the mortgage and actually put it to work. If your spending habits mean it disappears into restaurants and subscriptions, paying down the mortgage becomes forced savings. And forced savings beats theoretical returns every single time. A 2023 Federal Reserve survey found that about 28% of Americans nearing retirement age still carry mortgage debt. That tension between security and growth is real for a lot of people. So how do you actually decide? Here's the framework. Most financial content leaves you with "it depends" and sends you on your way. I want to give you something more concrete. Here's the rule. If your mortgage rate is below 4%, invest the difference. The math strongly favors it. You're essentially borrowing cheap money and putting it to work at a higher rate. If your rate is between 4 and 6%, split the difference. A hybrid approach, some extra payments, some investing. The gap is close enough that personal factors like your risk tolerance and timeline matter a lot. If your rate is above 6%, then consider aggressive paydown, especially if you're risk-averse or within 10 years of retirement. And one bonus rule, if you're more than a decade from retirement and you have no high-interest debt, lean toward investing regardless of where you fall on that scale. Both Vanguard and the Financial Planning Association advocate a similar approach. Compare the guaranteed return of debt elimination against expected market returns, then factor in your tax situation and personal risk tolerance. You now have a more precise tool than you'll get from almost anywhere else. Okay? Remember that seed I planted at the very beginning? I said this wasn't really a financial question. Here's what I mean. The math is actually pretty clear. For most people with low-rate mortgages, investing beats paying down the loan. The spreadsheet has a winner, but people don't make this decision with spreadsheets. They make it with feelings, with fear of debt, with a deep desire to own their home outright, with a gut sense that owing money feels unsafe, with memories of their parents grinding for 30 years to pay off the house and holding that up as the ultimate mark of success. Those feelings are completely valid. They're just not financial logic. Here's the real insight. Once you know the math, the decision becomes a values question. How much does debt-free peace of mind cost you? Maybe it's $200,000 in foregone returns over 20 years. Is that worth it to sleep better at night? For some people, genuinely, yes. But here's the thing. Most people have never run the numbers. They're making a values decision without knowing the price tag. Now you know the cost. Now you can decide. Here's your one-sentence takeaway. If your mortgage rate is below 4%, you are almost certainly better off investing the difference. And every month you don't, you're quietly paying for emotional comfort with compound interest. Whether that trade-off is worth it, that's entirely your call. But now you're making it with your eyes open. If this reframed how you think about your mortgage, even just a little, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear this. Subscribe if you want more videos that skip the "it depends" and give you actual frameworks you can use. And drop a comment below. What's your mortgage rate? And after watching this, are you rethinking your strategy? I read every single one.